Hello and welcome to the European Football Show's Europa League preview. In the build-up to the upcoming game week, we are dissecting each fixture with an assortment of deaths from around the world. And in today's clip, we look at Real Betis versus Eintracht Frankfurt, one of the many exciting matchups waiting for us this Thursday. To go in depth on Betis, I'm joined once again by Ruadhri Barlow. He's a regular feature on La Liga Lowdown, and seeing as Betis keep making it further in Europa League, he seems to be becoming a regular feature on BTL as well. Rory, how are we doing?
Yeah, I'm excellent, thanks. I'm sending my regards to Manuel Pellegrini because it's good to be back on, but he is the reason. And so, yeah, just another reason to love the engineer, as he's called.
Well, he's humble as well, Rory. He's got a bit of everything, I guess. And of course, Betis, they were one of eight sides who ended up finishing second in the group stage. And alongside Braga and Rangers, are now also one of three runners up that are still in the competition. So, what did you make of that matchup against Zenit? I mean, it started off with a bang, 5 goals in the opening 45 minutes. We were looking like we're going to get one of the best Europa League ties in history. And then, well, nothing really happened after that. 135 minutes without a single goal. So, talk to me about that one.
Yeah, I think we saw sort of two sides of Betis. We saw the Betis that we know and love, the goal scoring Betis, the Betis that will go toe to toe with you, will really sort of try and take the game to you, play it on their terms, but I mean, they're not going to close off all the space. And that's what we saw in the first leg. Admittedly, I did think Betis were maybe good enough for a two-goal lead in that first leg. I mean, they had sort of 5, 6 minutes of madness in which they conceded the two Zenit goals. And I think they did well to hold out in that match in the end. I thought they defended pretty well. But given they were without Nabil Fekir and Sergio Canales, I thought they did an excellent job in that match. And in the second leg, it was, yeah, the resilient side of Betis that I don't think we've seen in years past. And I think that ability to sort of play a bit differently, to use the other side's weaknesses to their advantages. I mean, they did get a little lucky with a VAR call at the end, it should be pointed out. But overall, I think we saw a mature Betis, and that's what's made the difference for Manuel Pellegrini this season.
And obviously, a bit of luck can help you get far in the Europa League, but in domestic play, I mean, that really shows how they've been a side that throughout the entire campaign has shown the maturity, like you said. And that's kind of where we go next. I mean, they're in third place still. Last time we recorded, they were also in third place, but they also have now made it to the semifinals in the Copa del Rey, which is another exciting opportunity, but also one which brings a lot of fixtures because we're seeing that the Spanish FA is kind of piling all of this into the February months. And it's ended up being that Betis has now played 8 matches last month. That's an average of a game every 3.5 days. So definitely a lot for the squad to contend with, and something that could end up really hurting them in this upcoming matchup against Eintracht Frankfurt, who weren't in the DFB Pokal, of course, had that extra respite from not competing in the Europa League first round of knockout fixtures either. So how do you think that plays into this matchup? And is this roster set up to officially compete on multiple fronts?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think Betis have done an excellent job of keeping themselves fresh enough until this point in the season. This Frankfurt tie, I do think it comes at a bad time for them in terms of fixtures because their league run at the minute is really difficult. They've just faced Sevilla, their city rivals, and lost to them. They've got Atletico Madrid, who sit just a point behind them in the league. Then they move on to fixtures against Athletic Club. And just generally, they've a lot of fixtures at the minute, a lot of important fixtures. And so they are going to be pushed to the limit by this tie. I have no doubt about that. Overall, I think they've done a really good job of rotating sort of the resources they have. I thought at the start of the season that this Betis team was going to be a bit short for competing on free fronts, but credit to them. I think the way that they play, the fact that they've been scoring so many goals, means that in certain matches they've been able to sort of lower the tempo and they've been able to sort of play out 20, 30 minutes of games without having to really strain themselves. And I think that's part of the reason the relaxed atmosphere that Pellegrini has really instilled in this side. So to the point where, I mean, they're always intense and they're always playing to win, but they're sort of comfortable on the pitch and they're enjoying themselves. I think that makes a difference. Whereas you look at some other teams who've had severe injury crises, and part of that I think is the fact that if you're uncomfortable and if you are being asked to do things that you don't want to do, that you don't feel comfortable doing on the pitch, you're playing a lot of games, then that sort of anxiety can kind of set in. And perhaps that, I think the psychological side of injuries is something that's been researched and it's been proven. And I think that Pellegrini, yeah, I think he's managed that side of it well. And that partly explains why they've got to this point. Whether they make it sort of over this kind of over this peak and whether they manage to come out the other side fully intact, that remains to be seen. But I think that goes a little bit of a way to explaining just how they've managed it so far.
Yeah, so a lot of positives, a couple question marks, and let's sit with those positives then as we come to our final conclusion with this Betis chapter. If you had to kind of sum up where they're going to win this game, what is it about this Betis side that says they're going to make it to the quarterfinals?
Well, I think if you kind of look at their opposition and if you've got the analysis of Frankfurt to come, I think the fact that they're playing a German side, and I don't mean to stereotype all German sides into the exact same box, but German teams generally, I think there is a little bit more space available at times. And I think if you look at Fekir and Canales, they'll look to get into the half spaces in this match. And I think the fact that Ollie Glasner's side probably aren't going to sit really deep, I think that will help Betis out. It's not as if they're playing sort of Bayern Munich and they're going to be sort of unable to get out. I think they'll be able to bypass the press in theory. And I think that's where they'll really look to exploit this. They don't have an especially quick front line, but they do have Wanmi, and his movement in behind has been a revelation this season for them. And so I think they'll look to move the ball fairly quickly when it gets into the middle third, and then they'll look to bypass the Frankfurt press as they do.
Okay, fantastic. And then should Betis now bow out? What is the reason behind that? What do you think will have gone wrong for Pellegrini's side?
Well, on the flip side of it being a German team and it being an Ole Glasner team who obviously comes from the Red Bull franchise and comes from that kind of school of thought and that school of footballing style, I think Frankfurt will probably look to break fairly quickly. And if you look at the way that Glasner's been playing, and he's had either two up front or three up front with two kind of in behind, those players will look to get in behind the fullbacks who do push up Bellerin. It's often Bellerin and Alex Moreno. They will look to get forward. And so on the break, when it does break down, when Betis do lose the ball, I don't think they're used to a Bundesliga tempo in terms of the counterattacks. I think that's where Frankfurt can really, really hurt Betis. I think Betis will have to adapt to that. They'll have to be more careful with the ball than they would be in La Liga. I think that is potentially where Eintracht fans can look to get some joy.
Okay, and then to round it off before we head over to our Frankfurt correspondent, Rory, what's the score prediction? Are we going to be seeing you again for another BTL preview in the quarterfinals, or will this be your final goodbye from us today?
In Pellegrini, we trust, and as a result, I'm going to say 4-2 on aggregate.
So that was some fantastic insight from Rory there. And now we move on to the other side of this equation. Opponents Eintracht Frankfurt. The Adler, as they are nicknamed, came through in first place from a qualifying group consisting of Olympiacos Piraeus, Fenerbahce, and Royal Antwerp. And to profile their chances, we're now joined by Brian Sanders of the Hey Eintracht Frankfurt podcast. Brian, how are we?
Buzzing. I will point out to everyone listening that there's a caveat to that because I am being spoken to immediately after an Eintracht Frankfurt victory, the first one in quite a few matches over Hertha BSC, Hertha Berlin, for anyone who was kind of wondering what the BSC means. And 4-1 win. Oh, we're buzzing and we're ready to rock and roll in the competition that we just love, the Europa League.
Yeah, Brian, you hear the optimism in your voice, and that leads me so nicely into this next question because it just goes off of, Eintracht are no strangers to the Europa League. They've been in this 4 times in the last decade, each time making it to the knockout stages. And I mean, just go back to 2018-19 to see a really fairy tale run there, making it all the way to within a penalty shootout of the final, dispatching Inter Milan along the way, narrowly going out to Chelsea, eventual winners. So they have quite a pedigree in this competition. And just to kind of start us off here, what do you think it is about Eintracht Frankfurt and the European Cup, which just provides so many fascinating storylines along the way?
Well, it comes with our history. So if you dive deeper beyond the Europa League era of what was previously known as the UEFA Cup, and you kind of know for a fact that back in the day, before the Champions League became what was the pinnacle of competition within Europe, the UEFA Cup or the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup were kind of like you had your second through however many places within your league, your top end teams. And Eintracht had a history dating back to that, winning the 1980 competition over Borussia, fellow Bundesliga side, Borussia Mönchengladbach. Eintracht has also appeared in what was considered to this day still the greatest European Cup final, the 1959 European Cup final against Real Madrid, played in Glasgow. People are still talking about that. People still ask me about that. And I keep on telling them that was before my dad was born. So moving from there, why is the Eintracht so good at the Europa League? You got, with the history, you've got Eintracht passed down from father to son, father to daughter, mother to son, mother to daughter. This is really a family club that is passed down heretically. And you hear the stories of the deep runs of the olden days. And that is what has spurred on so much love for the Eintracht. You got to realize also the city, financial capital of Europe. So a lot of the big money spenders at the big banks, Coleman's Bank, Deutsche Bank, just to name two, love buying out those suites. But it's the other nearly 50,000 seats in the Waldstadion, the now Deutsche Bank Park, that just make a deafening roar when the Eintracht is playing. It's a wonderful sight to behold. It's a wonderful sight to hear. And when other teams go in, they know that they are going into a cauldron of noise, and that really pulls the team together and has created multiple runs into the knockout phase, including recently a quarterfinals and a semifinals appearance.
Yeah, I mean, just for some of the viewers out there, just look up some of Eintracht Frankfurt's Europa League tifos, and you'll see some absolutely amazing sights, right? What they've been able to come up with in the past few seasons. But I mean, going on just a bit to last summer now, a lot has changed in Eintracht in the off season. They saw manager Adi Hütter depart. He of course went to Borussia Mönchengladbach. Top scorer Andre Silva also going to RB Leipzig. Then a bit more on the backroom side, sporting director Freddy Bobic. He was off to Hertha BSC, your opponents this evening. So how have Frankfurt been able to recover from these departures? Because these are obviously pretty big names that were key parts of not just last season, but also for many of them, at least for Bobic and Hütter, big parts of that fantastic Europa League run in 18-19.
Yeah, so let's go from the playing staff side of things. So Andre Silva, he really benefited from some time bedding in. So he was a part of the team that made the quarterfinals, got bounced by Basel in the round of 16. My mistake. Got bounced by Basel in that. Right as people who will look at dates, they'll notice. Yeah, right as COVID was really taking hold. So quite the interesting time. Last season was an amazing season where, as you mentioned, a top goal scorer. In normal times, you would think that the Eintracht would have a top-end goal scorer if you have 25 goals or more. But when you have a guy like Robert Lewandowski break the goal-scoring record for Germany for the Bundesliga, it's kind of hard to make a play. Kind of hard to get the top goal-scoring award again for the Eintracht. For Andre Silva, but he broke the club goal scoring record last season. But I knew for a fact that when Eintracht finished in fifth, and there needs to be a caveat when I say this, they finished in fifth because Freddy Bobic was already agreed to leave to Hertha Berlin, and then Adi Hütter announced that he was leaving for Gladbach. The team kind of nosedived and ended up finishing in fifth, and the Europa League. If we had finished in the Champions League, I guarantee you that Silva would have stayed, and you would have had Oliver Glasner, who would have kept more of the same style for the team together, so as to best be able to negotiate the kind of the fun issues that occur when you have a coaching change. So, switching to Adi Hütter, nice payout that we got for him. Not so nice payout that we had for Andre Silva. You would have thought we would have gotten more, but he went to Rasenballsport Leipzig, where our current sporting director comes from. Actually, Croatia came from the Leipzig camp. did not fit in with Leipzig whatsoever. So that was one that kind of worked out for us. He's a guy who helped Paderborn go from near barely surviving the third division, being relegated from the third division to the fourth tier, which is a regionalized competition in Germany, that Regionalliga. And he got Paderborn to immediately bounce back, winning promotion from the third division, then winning promotion from the second division. He then got the job as Ralf Rangnick was leaving his post there at Leipzig, and he just wasn't a fit. So, hey, we're benefiting from that. We're benefiting from the fact that Wolfsburg then, for their sporting director to not agree with the coach, despite a fourth place finish coming off of a seventh place finish, Glasner just kind of dropped into the Eintracht Frankfurt's hands. Yeah, here we are, mid-table, doing okay, struggling a little bit at times, doing well at times, doing well in the Europa League. It's been a lot of changes with the team. We brought in a lot of new players, and whenever you have a change in administration from top to bottom, you're going to have a lot of betting in problems. But if you look at the other coaches that have made the changes within the Bundesliga, Glasner has had trouble, and Rose who went from Gladbach to Borussia Dortmund, which caused Borussia Mönchengladbach to go for Adi Hutter. You would say that those two guys, as the only guys who really have their job still, have actually navigated these kind of troubled waters the best. And yet there's a lot of Eintracht transfers that are coming in that have already been announced for next season, that I'm already looking onto the horizon and just saying, hey, whatever we get out of the Europa League, we'll take it. We're not getting relegated. We're not likely to get promoted, get into the promoted levels of European qualification. So, as an Eintracht fan, I'm happy to let us just have our time in the sun in the Europa League once again.
Yeah, brilliant. So I think the key takeaway here is just a ton of moving parts, right? Some dominoes falling, which lead to other players and managers departing. And then, of course, on the other side, you have a bit of uncertainty surrounding Markus Kruse and his real role at Leipzig, and that opened up for Frankfurt to get what would probably be the ideal replacement in that sporting director role. So finally, then, before we move onto the score prediction, we had Rory in part one. He went with Real Betis to come through this one, went with his home Spaniard side. So, Brian, after what is a impressive 4-1 win over Hertha, are these kind of winning vibes flowing through you right now to go with Eintracht Frankfurt coming out of this tie?
In the leg one, no. I'm actually predicting that it's going to be a wild 2-2 affair, one that's going to drive the Real Betis advisor absolutely mad, drive me a little mad, make us both happy because, hey, we're knocking in goals, but, we got leaky defenses. So for the first leg, I'm predicting a 2-2 draw, but take it back to the Waldstadion, the Deutsche Bank Park, as for sponsorship reasons it is known as. I imagine that the Eintracht will come away with a 2-1 victory, giving us a 4-3 aggregate victory.